Okay, so let's welcome our guest from Santa Cruz, Alex Austin. So let's have a round of virtual applause in the chat, please, and say hi to Alex. Thank you so much for joining us. Um,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
so so we talked in the last lecture also a little bit about your games and about your really, really fantastic contribution towards, on the one hand, the technical aspects of within games. We talked a little bit about, I showed very quickly the trailer of Sub Rosa, and we also talked about these interesting concepts about the physics in your games, which I find highly interesting. Do you also want to maybe quickly introduce yourself and give a little bit of like main insights?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm Alex Austin. I've been doing indie games for about 20 years now. So, um, yeah, so I started out like around high school, like started doing programming. I'd always been interested in games, so started just kind of trying to make games with some friends of mine and stuff like that. And eventually started selling games. My first game was Pontifex, which was a sequel to Bridge Builder, which was a free game that I had made the year before. And yeah, been making games since then.
Very, very impressive. Um, so we talked a little bit in the last lecture, in the last stream, actually, about this current situation, which is now forcing all of us to work from home, to use new tools, to get to used to new tools. And in previous discussions, you mentioned that you, as an indie developer, you are used to working from home, for instance, making home office and working also distributed, like with teams sitting at different locations. Do you have maybe a little bit input on that, or and also advices in general?
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to remember is that it takes a while to kind of adjust to it, right? So don't expect to like be super productive, the first few weeks or even month probably. Um, but yeah, like I think for me, what works pretty well is like trying to keep to a routine. Like I, at least well, before this, I'd try to go outside at least a couple times a day. Now it's at least try to get out once a day, so you're not just always in front of the computer or in front of a screen. Or another thing that I think is pretty good to do is try to have like a separate place in your house or
Mm.
apartment that's like just for work. So you can kind of separate that from like when you're not working, because that can also be a thing of just working too much, but to the point where you're not even productive anymore, where you're just kind of staring at the screen, you know,
Oh wow, yeah.
which I still do sometimes. Um,
Do you
so
have
yeah, I'll go ahead.
do you have like a schedule, like a fixed schedule or
Um,
routine?
yeah, kind of. I mean, I usually don't really start programming until after lunch. So like in the mornings, I'll, like watch some videos or something and like kind of think about what I'm gonna work on that day. So like um, kind of plan it out a little bit, and but then I usually don't start until after lunch, and then work until sometimes work too late. Like work till like 11 or 12 or 23 or 24, I guess. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so like kind of a schedule, but not like a super strict schedule where I feel like anything creative, you know, I don't think it's a good idea to have like a super strict schedule
Hmm.
because you don't know how long things are going to take. And when
Oh,
when the right idea is going to come to you.
oh, this is so true. This is so true. Um, are there any specific tools which you use, which you can recommend? Like on the one hand, obviously in the case of working remotely, working in distributed ways, but also on the other hand, very in general, because I know your way of working is not Unity or Unreal. So I would love to hear all about it.
Yeah, so I'm I don't know I don't use a whole lot of tools like the tool I use are very basic. So I use Discord. Discord's pretty good, like that's a good way to talk with your team and stuff like that. And then we use Dropbox.
Hmm.
So I don't use any versioning
Oh, wow.
software.
How?
Yeah.
Why?
Here's my versioning system, which is gonna sound dumb, and it kind of is, but I still like it. Like I just make another folder with like it's Sub Rosa 01, and then when I'm doing a big change, I'll just copy it over to Sub Rosa 02. Um,
There's already
so
panic in the chat. How is this possible?
yeah, I know. Yeah, well, so like all of my stuff like is like that. Like the code editor I use is called Context, which is probably like 20 years old and like hasn't been updated in probably like 16 years. Um, so it doesn't have autocomplete or anything like that. I don't know. Like like I kind of see it as like almost like like training, right? Whereas if you make things harder on yourself, you're not going to write super complex code that's, like hard to figure out because like you don't have all these tools to like help you find where the code is and stuff like that.
Mm.
So, um, so yeah. And then yeah, with the versioning, like the one reason I do like doing actual directories is like I have all the data. So like if I want to run the Sub Rosa version from like 4 years ago, I can just run it. I have the exe and I have all the data and I can even recompile it if I want to. So it kind of keeps everything in one place. Um, and then also like I don't know, I always see stories of people like accidentally like not, like whatever pushing their code or something and losing a whole day of work and like I've never had that problem at least. So
Yeah,
I mean there has been a couple times where it's like, oh, I wish I kind of had the old version of this function, but usually I can just go into an older directory and find it.
absolutely.
So
Um,
yeah, all my tools and stuff, it's very basic, and like I just compile with command line. I just have batch files. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't really use too many other tools.
um, so what is your list of projects you realized is really long? What are like the
Yeah.
from your side? What are your personal highlights? I mean, obviously for us, Pontifex or the successor of that are really known, and also Sub Rosa is now really hyped. But I would love to hear from your perspective. What are the games which really thrilled you, which really, on the one hand, were interesting to develop, maybe, or fun to play for yourself, or excited the community? And
Yeah. So yeah, Bridge Builder and Pontifex, those were those were pretty fun. Like Bridge Builder was actually a side project for another game that I was working on, um, which was like a 3D multiplayer, like kind of hover jet game, like around 2000. And
what can go wrong?
yeah, um, yeah, it's I've lack of ambition has never been a problem for me. Um, it was, and that actually was a really fun game. Like my friends and I, we played that like over the LAN, just like We played that quite a bit. It's a pretty fun game, but we actually put out a demo for it. But back then it was really hard to get attention for something because you couldn't you couldn't even make a video of we couldn't make a video of it, and like it didn't look very impressive just from screenshots. Um, so yeah, it was definitely a harder time to get things to spread back then. So yeah, I had the idea for Bridge Builder a while before that, and I kind of realized that the physics from the other game would work pretty well. And so I put that up, and like that was another thing. Like that didn't spread at all for a while. Like I tried to like I was gonna try to make money off like advertising or something from the web page, which was not a good idea for a downloadable game.
Hmm.
But but yeah, it took a while, and then like I ended up getting a job, and then like that's when it started to spread and like get really popular. But luckily, I got laid off from that job, so got severance money and kind of took that and made Pontifex.
Cool.
Another one I just recently did an update for Gish. Uh, it was kind of fun going back through that. Like I rewrote a lot of the code for it, which was probably a waste of time, but it was kind of interesting. And added like co-op, uh, split screen co-op, which was something that we wanted to do back, 2004 or five, but weren't able to do. So that's another fun one, and it has some versus modes, which are really fun too. Uh, and that was another one that was kind of like before its time because like local co-ops or local multiplayer is like pretty popular now, and back then it's like people usually didn't even have one gamepad for their PC.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, there's quite a few games that I've made that like either like didn't get popular or got like a small group of fans that are pretty fun. There's uh first person hockey game, which is pretty fun.
First person
And
hockey game?
yeah, yeah. So like each player is a person, and and that has like a small cult following, which is kind of annoying because they really want like updates or like stuff like that, and it's like it's a free game. I haven't made any money off that. Um, so like uh, eventually, I'd like to make a version that's you know has some better graphics and like could possibly sell decently.
Cool.
Uh, I did a rugby and a basketball game, which I put up servers for those again. They're kind of cool. Those are also they're third person, but they're like each player is a person in those too. So like there's physics and stuff. Kind of fun.
I you already talked about how to spread a game. I mean, um, when you started, there was Steam was not really a thing, right? And what
Yeah.
how did this publishing methods changed and also change the way how you would design games, or did this influence some of your decisions
Yes.
anyhow?
Um, so yeah, when I started off like with Pontifex, I mean that did pretty well. I mean for the time, um, basically just because Bridge Builder had spread a lot.
Mm,
Like um, so I think like back then it's kind of like now. You have to make something that's really unique. Um, Back then had to be really unique because it had to be something that like people would tell their friends about. Um, and now it's you have to make something that people will make videos about. Um, I feel like for me, like it's actually a better time than like kind of what people call the golden age of indies, which is like 2008 to like 2012 or so like that. Like is that I feel like that time was more about like polishing a game. It's like
Mm.
make kind of a retro game and polish it up. And if you did that, you would make a lot of money. But like polishing's never been my strong suit. So it's kind of swung back to where it's more about making unique games, that people will make videos about because
Mm.
that's way more important than reviews are now. So for me, it's actually a better time than, like 10 years ago,
Um,
because it is kind of like it was really early on.
since we're already talking about the uniqueness of your game, I mean, one unique factor is definitely that that you yeah you're doing all the calculations yourself. You're doing the physics yourself. Many of your games are physics based, and there is one question in the chat is especially for Bridge Builder. Where did you get this knowledge from? Because this is like very like interesting knowledge about a very specific domain. So how did you learn that? How did you?
Um, so yeah, I like um, it's basically trial and error. Like it's not like I'm doing these super complicated equations. It's all like the physics of Bridge Builder is actually really simple. It's basically just the same particle spring equation, but you just run through it a bunch of times, right? So like, um, and by doing that, it kind of propagates the force. So it's actually kind of interesting. So like I barely passed physics in high school. Like I didn't really like the teacher that much, so I skipped it a bunch. And like didn't take any college classes on that. So like I just kind of picked up stuff, reading books and just kind of trying to figure out the smallest, the least amount I could learn, to make it work. Um, so yeah, it's definitely not a mathematical approach. It's more of um, just you know whatever makes it work. And I was actually explaining that to a friend of mine, like how the bridge builder physics and a lot of the physics that I do work, and it is just kind of this brute force thing of like just running through the equations a bunch. And he was asking me, he's like, "Well, what's the like mathematical basis for that?" And like, there isn't one, I guess. Like, it's not really like it's not like it's basically Euler integration, like explicit Euler, but you do the equation a bunch of times, or you just run through the calculation before it moves, and like that kind of propagates the force. I don't know. I'm probably not explaining this very well because it's, but yeah. So it's yeah, basically like a lot of the stuff I do, it's just like figuring out, what's the simplest way, like how can I simplify this but still like make it work.
Mhm. There's another element of your work which is really unique-ish, that you're really using for all of your projects. You're using C,
Yeah.
right? So why?
Um, so when I started off, this was like the mid 90s and C++ like compiled a lot slower back then. I mean, it still does now, but it was like way slower back then. Um, and I think I started using C++ because like must be better or something. But I started writing assembly, and I couldn't figure out how to link assembly to C++. I'm pretty sure that's the reason like I switched back to C. Um, and I don't know. I just never saw anything in C++ that would be useful to me. Uh, so yeah, like I try to keep things as simple as possible because like I have a lot of projects. Like you know, there's a lot of code. Like Sub Rosa is a pretty complicated game. Um, So like making things overly complicated, I think, is something you want to try to avoid. And like that's why by keeping my tools simple, keeping everything, like don't change stuff very much, and like um, it keeps it, so I can kind of grasp it all, I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
That's great.
Um, yeah, I think like I don't know, my kind of argument against C++ would be that like it maybe saves you like 10 minutes of typing or like copying and pasting and searching and replacing stuff. But if, you know, if it adds like even like a few seconds to compile time, like that for me at least would add up be way more than 10 minutes in the end because like I probably compile like 100 times a day. Um, so yeah, I
So
want to
you,
keep compile times down to like, I mean, like Sub Rosa compiles in about 2 seconds, probably.
wow, okay, that's impressive.
Yeah. So,
So you must have a giant library, personal library of cool stuff already.
um, well, no, I don't. It's not in libraries. It's just the source code. So it's compiling
Mm-hmm.
that too. Um, but yeah, I have a lot of stuff um, that I've developed over the years that I can kind of share. So, and that's one of the big things I've been rewriting is the GUI stuff, which um, has been a lot of work, like a
Mm-hmm.
lot more than I thought it would be. But I'm pretty happy with how it's turning out. It's definitely going to make like editors a lot easier to write, which is when you're writing your own engine, that ends up being a lot of the time like
Mm-hmm.
uh, writing editors. That's one of the big savings I think you get from Unity or Unreal. You don't have to like if you want to put a 3D model in there, you don't have to write an importer. Um, which I mean that took a while. Like the characters in Sub Rosa, this artist Sofia de Silva um, did those, and like I'm really happy with those. I really like the style, but it took me weeks to get those imported. Like with the bones, and like I had never done bones before, never done the skinning. Like in the shader, so that took a while. So yeah, there's definitely stuff that like would be a lot easier with an engine,
I
but
mean, since we're already talking about Sub Rosa, let's talk about Sub Rosa.
okay.
So, so when did you start developing this game? How was the like main vision in the beginning, and how did this change over the past years during the development? What is more to come? Many questions.
Yeah. So I did it. It was for the first 7-day FPS game jam,
Oh wow.
which I think was 2012. So yeah, I did the first version in 7 days. But that was
Oh.
a pretty rough version. Um, and I copied a lot of code from this other game, A New Zero, that I was working on, which another game that I'd like to finish at some point. Um, so yeah, the original inspiration was Arma 2, the military sim.
Yes.
So there's this group called Shack Tech that would make videos, and they would make kind of custom missions that they would play. And one of their custom missions was there was three teams. There was kind of like a U.S. team, a Russian team, and then kind of like a terrorist group. And the whole idea is like the terrorist group has captured a U.S. pilot, and the U.S. wants to get him back, but Russia also, or I don't know what they're actually called. I think they're called like Red Force or something. They want to get him. So those two teams both want to get him. The Red Force has like a ammo truck to trade with the terrorists. So like they have to try and figure out a place to do this deal, but the third team is like trying to find out where they're doing the deal and like come in and like break it up. And I just really like kind of that asymmetric thing of like, like two teams meeting, doing a deal, and like they can they can try and shoot each other, or they can actually try and do like a clean deal, and then but then the third team kind of coming in to try and ruin it also. So that was basically kind of took that idea and like kind of realized like in their version the the pilots, like the people that they're trying to capture are played by players, and like that's something that you can't really do with just an online game where it's not moderated, because people will just cheat and say like I'm over here, come pick me up. So instead of having the pilots, I had like documents, or eventually became a disc
Mm.
that the two teams want, and then they have money to trade with them, and it's got the thing of like they have money to trade, but they can also just try and keep it, give them an empty briefcase. Like that was one of the very early things, was having a briefcase that you could either put the money in or not.
Cool.
So yeah, that was kind of the basic idea. I mean, the like kind of broad concept is like put people in a world where like they have guns and they can shoot each other, but they don't necessarily always want to. Because I kind of like that, like trying to create situations like that, which um, aren't just straightforward.
The I mean, the computers are a special element. Do you in the game?
Yeah,
How do you?
so yeah, it's definitely developed since there. Now there's more teams, and it's kind of more of an open world where it's not just round based. There is a round based mode, but like if you want to play kind of more open world, like there'll just be missions kind of happening throughout the city. So like
Mm,
it's kind of fun because you can just see, sometimes you can just, there'll be like a car chase or something happening which isn't related to what you're doing, but that's just like two teams just doing a car chase or something like that. Um, so yeah, one of the new things that I've been working on lately that's going to be in the next version, which I'm not sure when that'll be ready. Hopefully this week, but yeah, I don't know if it will be. But so now there's computers, so there's actual files on these computers that you can copy to a floppy disk and then bring back to your base, and then copy it onto you know, your server or something. Um, and yeah, so like it kind of opens up a lot of possibilities for like you could give the other team a fake disk, with the wrong file on it, or like and one of the things that you'll have to like discover from like these clues is like what the file name actually is. So like the buildings have multiple computers and they can have a bunch of files on them. So even if you know the location of the file, you don't know necessarily what the file name is. So
hmm
that also creates a lot of possibilities where maybe one team knows the location, but they don't know what the file name is, and the other team does know what the file name is. So they could either work out a deal with them to like split the profits, or wait for them to go in and copy the disk over and then just ambush them, or you know.
What was like in terms of style? I mean, Sub Rosa has a very specific style. What was your inspiration for that? Any thoughts?
So one of the main ones is this game Interstate 76, which came out in like 95 or 96. Um, and it had like these really cool, like it took place in kind of an alternate 70s, and it had these really cool low poly models. And that was one of the main inspirations that Sophia worked with. I mean, she has really cool low poly style, like, and so we just kind of adapted with that. And So yeah, for the characters, that's definitely one of the styles. And then like it's just kind of low poly um, style for the world, which um, we're still kind of working on like the texture look because it's a tricky one of like most low poly games just have basically no texture,
Mm.
but there's certain situations where you want at least a little bit of texture. It's kind of a tricky balance of uh, trying to figure out the right level of texturing. But yeah, basically just low poly because I wanted to have like a really big city with interiors and stuff, and you know wouldn't be possible really to do that with like a lot of high poly stuff.
You, the last time we talked, you told me this lovely, like this insights about the 17 colors, and the
Oh yeah, for the
I
computers.
yeah. Could you tell the story again? I really love this one.
Yeah, so when I first started off with the computers, they were just black and white, but I realized like one of the things you can do is run programs on these computers, and one of them is a decrypt program, which is like a substitution cipher. And I realized I needed to kind of like highlight some of the letters sometimes. So to do that, I wanted to have some colors, and so I looked up like how the CGA graphics adapter worked, which was like came out in the early '80s, I think. And the way that works is it has 16 colors. So it's a text-based mode. So you got like, however many characters. I think for that one it was like 70 by 35 or something like that. So so yeah, it's kind of like I think a lot of younger people probably don't get it, but like back then you couldn't just have like memory for each pixel because that's like the computer had like 64K sometimes, and even like a 320 by 200 resolution, it's like that's all of your memory right there if you have 8-bit. Um, so yeah, this had like characters, like text characters, so it's all ASCII, like that's kind of where ASCII art originated. Um, and the CGA adapter added 16 colors. So you had 16 for the background and 16 for the foreground, and so that's 4 bits each. So like each character has a byte. So it has a byte for the character and then a byte for the color. But yeah, the funny thing is that the engineers like they just started with the primary colors. You have red, green, and blue, and then you have the combinations of those, and then you also had the intensities of those. You could have lower intensity ones, but the yellow for that was so ugly that they actually like put in circuitry to like shift it one so it was more of a brown rather than a yellow. And yeah, so it's
It it indeed was a terrible yellow.
yeah, yeah. If you look it up,
I was
like I
just,
actually have a picture of it here, and like
can you
it's
share it with us?
yeah. Do you just put it in the Discord or something?
Yes, should
Yeah,
work. Um,
yeah. There it is. Oh,
Sorry, I just need to share this somehow. Do I just move this? Yes. Can everyone see this? Very, very terrible yellow.
yeah,
I just love this idea that like even computer scientists back then realized that this is a very terrible yellow. It was not like
yeah,
graphics people, the artist
yeah.
saying it,
Exactly.
right?
Like yeah, it must have. It was probably just the engineers, but even the engineers were like, "Okay, that's too ugly. We gotta
Ugh.
let's make it brown."
Yeah,
Um,
that is indeed
so
this.
yeah, like it's for all the other colors, it's just like a simple equation. You take like, is the red bit on, you know, um, so yeah, there's three bits. So there's like a red, green, and blue bit, and then there's an intensity bit. Um, so yeah, to make normal yellow, you just do like red and green bit on, and then if you turn on the low intensity, it just like shifts those colors down. But yeah, this is a specific one that like they actually changed it. Um,
And we're all
so yeah,
glad for that.
yeah. Yeah, the brown definitely like I think I was telling you last time that like there used to be BBS games which use these like text-based modes because that was also something that you could send over a modem back then, since it wasn't like a full like pixel-based image, you could just send basically ASCII art and like I think the brown was pretty useful in that, you could do ground and stuff like that, which the ugly yellow wouldn't have been very useful for games.
Um, we have plenty of questions in the chat and Discord. Are you open for some questions still?
Yeah.
Cool. So the first one would be, what would you give a game designer on the way? What should be considered most? Some inspirations, some tips, some very easy question for the beginning.
So what advice
What advice
for,
would you give a game designer, especially a young indie developer, for instance?
I mean, I think just start making games. Like, um, game design is something nobody's born with game design, skills. Like, you just have to learn it. And I think that's one kind of mistake that I made early on was I was too ambitious. Like, I was trying to make a first-person shooter like around Quake 1 days, and like I mean I actually did make an engine like that kind of worked, but like I never got to the point of actually making a game. But I did make some smaller games back then. I actually found an old hard drive, and it had some of these prototypes on it, and I was playing one of like this really old like boat combat game, and it just wasn't fun at all. Like, kind of realized like, yeah, it's like technically it's kind of cool. Like and it actually had multiplayer that worked over the serial port, which was what you had before USB. Um, so yeah, it was like I think back then like I was making some like technically impressive stuff, but I wasn't making games, and like
Hmm.
I wasn't really kind of learning these lessons that you just have to learn over time. So definitely, yeah, just start making games. You know,
Hmm.
learn as much as you can, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely different now. There's a lot more tools that you can use. Like Unity and Unreal, and so um, it's a lot easier to get started, I guess. But it still takes time. Like game design takes time. Like even if you have these tools.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. But you just mentioned that your Sub Rosa what was it, Sub Rosa, developed in a very fast way, like the first, very, very first version during a game jam, right?
Yeah.
So what is your opinion on game jams? Do you still attend the game jams? Are they helpful for you? Is this something you find useful, or what is your
Yeah.
opinion on game jams?
Um, so I haven't done one in a while. Um, for me personally, like I like the 7-day ones
Hmm.
where it's more of a genre. because I like to kind of plan stuff out. Um, like kind of think about the design because I've done some of the like the Ludum Dare like in a weekend
Mm,
things, and like I just haven't like I just feel like I'm just programming the whole time. Like I don't have any time to like kind of think about the design at all. And so yeah, it's for me those are kind of too rushed. Like uh, I mean, I guess if I was working with a team, it would be better, but it still seems like it's kind of too short of a time. But I mean, if people have like a job and stuff, it's like they have to do that. So, um, but yeah, I do like the 7 day ones or longer ones like that where you can kind of think about it ahead of time, and then and you actually have some time to like work through a few things. But yeah, I mean, even the version of Sub Rosa that was done at the end of the week wasn't very good, but I mean, it had like the basic stuff. So,
mm,
but yeah, I think game jams could be useful. Like, I mean, I'd like to do more where you actually go somewhere and work around other people. Like I think that's pretty cool, but
mm.
that's not going to happen for a while. So,
Yeah, yeah. Maybe the game jam question was also not the most fitting now. Like there are online game jams.
yeah.
What I mean, since
But yeah,
we're
I think. Uh, sorry,
go
just
ahead.
gonna say that like I think it is good to like try and finish something in a short amount of time. Like, especially probably when you're starting off, like just um, because yeah, sometimes it can just seem like so daunting, like all the stuff you have to do for a game, and then you do a game jam, and yeah, you make like a really basic thing, but you realize that you can't actually can finish stuff. It's like not
Mm.
not totally impossible.
Since we're just hitting the Corona and quarantine and self-isolation topic again, I mean, usually events like GDC are super important in this industry to connect to people, to talk to publishers, to show off the game. So I think, I mean, you also go to GDC regularly, and I mean, does this made any impact on you, on your work that GDC did not happen this year?
It's not too big of an impact for me. Um, if, at this point, I pretty much just go to hang out with friends. Um, so I did miss that. Um, but for my work, like, yeah, it's I don't usually show games. I'm not very good at showing games. Um, I yeah, like I think I'm too critical of my own stuff, so like I'm not very good at hyping it. So um, but yeah, so yeah, it wasn't too big of an impact for me. But I don't know. You were gonna do a talk, right?
I was supposed to give a talk there, yeah. This is
Are
one
you?
of the rare occasions where I let a academic speak at a games industry conference. Yeah, no, I was supposed to talk about VR and education environments for VR. So yeah, it's a little unfortunate. I don't know. I'll just resubmit it now, next year. So it doesn't
Yeah,
mean that all of the talks which were not happening this year are just accepted next year. So that's not happening. So let's see.
yeah,
Was
yeah. I think some people were hit pretty hard with that. Like, yeah, especially people that were gonna go show their games there and
Yeah,
try and get a deal and stuff. Like, that's pretty rough. Like, hopefully people can still do stuff online and
yeah.
figure out ways of.
In Austria, they just announced the new regulations for events. So all events are prohibited until end of June for now. So this is the new announcement we got today.
Yeah.
So not a lot of real big events or conferences in our regions for the next months.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah. It
see.
seems like it's
Is
gonna be
it
at least summer.
Are events still allowed in America? No.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Like, there's still some states that aren't in lockdown, but
Yeah.
um, I don't think people are doing events, especially not big ones.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So more questions if you're still. Yes,
Yeah.
fantastic. So there's another question in the chat. And if you create 3D games, I mean, yeah, if you create 3D games, how did you start this process? Would you start in 2D, or would you go directly into 3D? Would you start with smaller prototypes? Um, yeah. How do you
So
approach 3D games differently than 2D games? Can we maybe can we can summarize this question like that?
yeah, so I can tell you how not to do it, which is how I did it, which was try to go straight into making 3D games. And this was like in the mid 90s before there was GPUs. So, um, like I said, like I started working on like a first person game. And I mean, I still don't know some of the math like behind it. Like that's another one where like with the physics, with graphics, I've just kind of like figured out like just by trial and error, like if stuff works. Like a lot of matrix stuff, I'll still just like, okay, try it out. Nope, that didn't work. Try it again. Okay, now it works. Same with quaternions. It's I like I d- I kind of understand them now, like a little bit, but like it's mostly just like, okay, once I get it working, I have a function to like, okay, rotate this thing to this thing. Um, that's good enough for me. But yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know, like I think it is useful to kind of go between 2D and 3D, and like I've done that for a while. Like Bridge Builder was 2D, Pontifex was 3D, and then like Gish was 2D. Uh, so I've done kind of both types of games, and it is kind of useful to like you learn some of the stuff, like some of the things with collisions that I figured out with Gish. I was able to expand those to 3 dimensions. Uh, so yeah, I think it's useful. I think it's useful to kind of go between even different genres also, like, um, but definitely different types of games, and yeah, going between 2D and 3D, you can figure out something in 2D and then like apply that to three
Mm.
dimensions, which isn't always straightforward. 3 dimensions, some of the stuff
It's
gets a lot
it's
more
a
complicated.
absolutely.
But yeah, I would say like try to be making games, you know, even if they're not totally complete games, but like getting gameplay going, I think is important. So not worrying about releasing games, like definitely, you know, don't spend a bunch of time polishing something that you're just kind of experimenting with. But getting to gameplay early is pretty good. And sometimes you can kind of try it out in 2D and then
Mm.
develop it into 3D if you want to. So, uh,
Um, since we're hmm, there, one pressing question from my side. Where would you draw your inspirations from? Are there any particular books which have inspired you, or other games, or like what do you do to inspire yourself? Or and also again, books. I'm always interested in books. Are there any readings you really enjoyed, or your favorite games which were important to you?
um, I don't read as much as would like to. Like, So I do read like technical books. Like I think that's pretty useful, but that's not really an inspiration thing. Um, I'm definitely I like games wise. I'm almost exclusively inspired by games from the 90s, I would say, or 80s or 90s.
Mm.
Um, I feel like that was kind of a better time for games, at least game design. Like there's a lot more, there's different genres, and I feel like I I, I have this, like I kind of feel like the GPU kind of ruined game design because like then it became all about graphics, like and especially GPUs when they first came out, like you pretty much had to have a static world. You couldn't have a lot of interactivity. And so, like, a lot of these kind of genres, like mixing stuff, kind of went away because, like, kind of became more about graphics.
Mm.
So that's why, yeah, like a lot of games from the 90s, um, like flight sims, like Falcon 3.0,
Mm-hmm.
Red Baron, uh, and then games like Mech Warrior 2, which is like I really like that era of like simulations where they weren't super realistic, but they weren't arcadey either. They were, kind of a blend, and I feel like that's kind of missing now. Sub Rosa is kind of that. It's it's somewhat of a simulation, and a New Zero, the other game I'm working on, is definitely trying to be in that area where it's a simulation, but like you don't have to read a 300-page manual to like turn the engine on, you know. Um, and Hidden in Danger, really, really fun. Like, especially if you could play it co-op, you could play like 4 players as like an SAS team, and it had a lot of really cool like kind of simulation-y aspects to it, where uh, you could pick up weapons off of your enemies and drive vehicles, even drive tanks.
Mm.
Um, and then yeah, games. So for Sub Rosa, one of the main ones I've been looking at is a game that I didn't actually play when it came out. And I still haven't even really played it. I've just watched videos of it. It's called Covert Action. It's a Sid Meier game,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of flopped when it came out. Like, and Sid Meier's talked about why he thinks it did, because it has a lot of different aspects, but it's a spy game, and so like kind of works with Sub Rosa, and that's where the decrypting part of it, like I've pretty much totally ripped that off of Covert Action. Um, but yeah, so like I've been getting some ideas from that. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like Covert Action would have been a lot better game if they had made it later on when they could do consequences and stuff, because it has like a car chase thing, but it's kind of convoluted where you have 2 cars that you're controlling, and it's just in a grid and doesn't really look that fun.
So playing games is absolutely a legit way to find inspiration.
Yeah, although I don't play that many games, I watch videos about games. Um,
Fair enough.
um, and then yeah, like just movies and TV, like definitely got a lot of ideas from that. Like shows like The Wire, like
Oh yeah,
I think what else? Um, oh, and like I think we talked about like westerns, like um,
I love westerns. Yeah.
yeah. So like one of the things that we're trying to incorporate is like the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mm.
Um, where like there's kind of different people and they're looking for this gold, and like they all have different information, right? So like that's um that's one of the aspects I want to have in the missions in Sub Rosa is, like I was saying earlier, like one team knows the file name, maybe another team knows the location.
Mm.
So it's kind of like this balance of like, okay, are we going to work together, or like is the team with the location with the file name just going to like get the location from the other team and then betray them and like try to get it all for themselves? Like I really like those possibilities
The,
of kind of negotiations and doing deals and
the good, the bad, the ugly. This is one of the greatest movies.
yeah, it's on Netflix at least in the U.S. So I'm gonna watch it again
Mm.
probably this week. Um,
There's another question about financial situations as game developers, and very concrete question: am I able to make some money with, for instance, small mobile games? Do you have a
with with what games?
with small mobile games?
Mobile games? I have no idea. Like I think some people have. That's one aspect where I would like to make games for the phone. I think some of my games would translate well, but I do not want to deal with those tools. Like, I tried to install the Android SDK once, and like that was just a day
Yeah,
of hell.
but
Like
some of your
I
games
do.
would be really fantastic for mobile. This is the
Yeah,
benefit of a game engine. You can just push a click.
yeah,
No, it's not like that easy, but still it gives you a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah, people in
I
the
think eventually, like if I could find a team that could do the porting and stuff, because I also don't want to deal with. Well, I don't want to deal with Apple. Like I'm not even doing Mac games anymore because the way they're locking down the Mac. Like you have to get a uh, like a license thing. Like I'm just not going to bother with that. It's not worth the time.
people are already claiming Sub Rosa mobile. When will it? When will
No,
the release
Sub
will
Rosa
happen?
is not one of the games that I think would translate that well. Um, it would be hard to type in the DOS commands with a phone keyboard.
Oh, I mean,
Um,
you never know.
yeah, no, I mean, I think like, yeah, it's one of those things. Like, I think it would actually be interesting if somebody did make like a port, like not just try and like port the game over, but actually make a version that would work on the phones. Kind of simplify some stuff. Like,
Oh yeah,
I think
yeah,
that could be interesting. But,
yeah.
but yeah, yeah. As far as like, I have no idea. Like, I would like to make mobile games, but like, I don't know. Seems pretty hard to because that's even worse than Steam, where you have like I don't know, hundreds of games coming out a day probably.
Yeah. How is your experience with Steam?
Um, I don't. It's kind of just something I have to deal with, I guess. Like I I would say one of the worst things about Steam is like the lack of like control that developers have. Like I would like to be able to block people on Steam. Like basically like force them to take a refund for my game and like not be able to buy my games ever again.
Mm,
Because there's some people that just aren't worth dealing with. It's like I don't want your $20. Like, take it back, and I don't have to deal with you anymore.
mm,
And it's something that I've seen other developers request from Valve, but like they feel like I don't know what they feel like. I guess they feel like they're making billions of dollars a year. Why
mm.
change that?
Yeah,
Um,
it's really difficult to find the balance.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Steam is kind of just a tax on indie developers.
Mm,
You have to put it on there, and you have to give up 30%. Um, and it doesn't, you're not benefiting at all. Like it used to be, if your game was on Steam, you'd sell, thousands of copies at least. Now there's like no guarantee you're going to sell 10 copies.
yeah.
So, so yeah, I mean, they, I'll say one thing that they did do good is the sharing thing, like what that's called, like where you can share your screen so you can play like local multiplayer games. over.
Oh, how is it called? A theater? No. Uh,
Um,
anyone in the chat can help? How is this mode called? Oh no,
oh, it's
sorry, not usually.
remote play, I think,
Remote play.
maybe. Um,
Remote
anyway,
play,
like,
yeah. Family sharing? No, family sharing is when you can share the same games, your library with the family, right?
yeah.
Remote play, I think it's what someone also mentioned in the chat.
So like Gish works. Like we actually tested that out with remote play, which it's kind of cool to be able to play like a local multiplayer game without, the developer doesn't have to add any netcode at all, and like it just works. So yeah, that's something good they did. And but yeah, for the most part, it's just like, okay, I have to deal with this.
There would be one more very interesting game design question in the chat about how do you balance your games? How do you, I think very difficult part usually in a game development process, but probably a very interesting point, especially in your games.
Yeah. So
Sorry
multiplayer
that you have to
games,
see that.
uh, multiplayer games are
Oh no,
what's that?
no, kids get angry.
Uh, um, yeah, balancing multiplayer games is the hardest part. Like, there's a lot of hard parts about making multiplayer games, like netcode, all that stuff. But yeah, the balancing is definitely the hardest part. One of the most kind of frustrating things about it is like how quickly you'll get griefers. Like, I remember I put up the first version of a new Zero, like, like 10 years ago or something, and like immediately somebody started griefing. It's like, oh man. Like, and I didn't have a way of like kicking people out of this. That's another technical thing that you have to do. Um, so yeah, like just figuring out ways of basically preventing people from griefing, or a lot of times it can be kind of like unintentional griefing, or just exploits, stuff like that. But yeah, it's one of the things that you just kind of have to put it out there. Like, that's one of the things I've done for a while is just release um, kind of prototypes of multiplayer games, see how people are playing it, and just kind of adjust from there. Like, and what exploits are they using, and then like how can I fix that? So yeah, I think it's one of those things that just has to be kind of trial and error. Like, there's no way you're not, even if you have a big team, you're not going to think of all the devious devious things that people online are going to think of. Um, so yeah, it's just something you just have to kind of work through. And
Hmm.
uh, but for balancing games in general, like uh, um, actually, so one thing I would kind of advise is like, don't really listen to what people say. Just
Mm-hmm.
like watch how they're playing the game,
Mm-hmm.
and also if they're playing the game. I think that's one of the most important things. Like, is if they're playing the game. If they're playing the game and they're complaining to you, like, that's there's probably a problem there, but like that's a good thing. Like, if they're not playing the game and like just suggesting things, then you haven't hit on, you're missing something. Like, you have to make you want people to be playing it even if there's flaws in it. So um
But this was such a pretty quote. I think this was the first time I used the clip that feature of Twitch to make a clip out of a quote.
um but yeah, and well, like especially like with a game like Sub Rosa, there's so many possibilities with it that, like, people will have good ideas, and like, it's not like I'm saying that people's ideas are stupid. It's just that, like, I have to go in the direction, like I'm doing all of the programming for it, so like I don't have time to like kind of go off on these tangents and like experiment with other stuff and like uh so yeah, like I kind of have to just go on the path that I'm trying to go on. So I kind of have to ignore people.
We would have one very specific question. Will Sub Rosa be available for Linux?
It is available for
It
Linux.
is.
Yeah.
It is. Easy answer to that. Okay.
Um, and it used to be available for Mac, but I'm not going to do that anymore because of Apple's policies.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty sure the latest version. I usually like I'll do the beta version of Windows only first, but then I'll do the Mac or do the Linux version. Uh, it's pretty easy. Like at this point, my code is portable enough that I just have to copy it over and compile it. So,
So I would ask like one last round in the chat if there are still any questions. And in the meantime, like again, thank you so much for taking so much time for us. There are so many interesting insights and a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience. Like what, 20 years ago you started developing games? It's crazy.
well, probably like 25 years,
Wow.
really. Like so, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
that's incredible. It,
but
I
yeah, I no, it's good to. I think it's also good to like do stuff like this because it also makes me think about my process and like I think it's always good to be questioning how you're doing things. Like, 'cause I feel like that's the best way to learn.
no.
Um,
So I think every like all of the processes, but this missing subversion system seem to be really. But if it, but it's so interesting because this is I find this actually I find this really inspiring because subversion, this is something which we are getting used to because we already allow ourselves constantly to make mistakes, and using subversion makes it so easy for me to just go back and yeah, don't think about the mistakes I made before. So maybe not using the subversion system in your case, um, maybe because of that you're more considerate of your code and thoughtful of what you're putting there. I don't know, just some
yeah.
thoughts.
Well, I feel like it's like to me, I feel like it's kind of like you're training, right? Like you're training like for like a martial art or something. Like you don't want something that makes your training easier, right? You want to like challenge yourself, and in some ways, I think that's good because in the end, like the hardest part of programming is debugging. And like I saw a quote, I forget exactly what it was. I think it was one of the X-Plane developers, but he's saying that like if you write code that's like the limit of your intelligence, right? When you get to debugging, it's going to be beyond what you can do. So you should write code that's like, like half as smart as like you can handle. And then when you get to debugging, you can handle it. So,
That's
I mean,
good.
I
That's good.
seriously like would advise write the stupidest code you can.
And I've
Like
clip for that.
I was telling you about like the structure, the array of structs stuff that I've been doing lately. And like I had this idea for it years ago, but I just thought it was too dumb. But like it's actually it is dumb, but it actually works really well. So
Yeah,
like
I love that.
um
This is
so yeah.
really.
I also think like I feel like with programming there's kind of like a religious aspect to it, like there's people that believe that these things work and like if you're not questioning it, I think that's bad because like then does become like a religion where it's like a faith-based thing. And and I feel like there's a lot of that with programming right now. It's like this is the way to do it because this is the way it's always been done, or this is the way I was taught how to do it. But I don't think it's a very efficient way of programming. It's not fast and it's not. simple. It's not. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe can I close this really really great discussion with one last question?
Yeah.
So, what are your next steps? I mean, what are your like? You're still working hard on Sub Rosa. You're still. What are your next steps there? And also more general, how does the next projects of Alex Austin look like? How does the what are you expecting or trying to? Yeah. What are your next steps?
Um,
Also,
so a lot of it depends on how Sub Rosa does. Like, um, if it does well, then hopefully I have enough money to develop some of my other projects. I have a lot of stuff that's like I just haven't had the time to finish up or, the resources to finish up. Um, so if Sub Rosa does well, then I'll work on a lot of different projects. If it doesn't, I'll probably get a job because that's I'm kind of tired of just barely getting by, which I've been doing last quite a while. Um,
I'm very, very like pretty sure that Sub Rosa will do really well and we'll hope to
Hopefully,
see so many more of your projects. This is like really love so many of your projects and how
thank you.
you approach the development process.
Yeah, well, I was actually talking to a friend of mine about Sub Rosa and um, like my strategy for it is either it goes huge or it totally crashes and burns. Like I definitely don't want to be like barely making it and like having to add support for, all kinds of stuff that like I'm barely making enough to get by. Like that's not the point I want to be at. So like that's what I've been trying to do is trying to make stuff that like I think will like kind of cause exponential growth, get a lot of people interested in it. Or if it doesn't work, then that's fine. But like I want to go for that, kind of go for the big ideas and hopefully hit it. Anyway,
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. This was really, really interesting, really inspiring. Thanks for taking so much time for us. Are
yeah,
there any links we should share in the chat? Someone already posted your Twitter link to your Twitter profile, where you can, which is full of great Sub Rosa gifs.
yeah, um, yeah. That's usually where I post. I haven't really been doing blog updates lately. Something I'd like to do some uh, more like code stuff on there, but
This, I think, this would be very interesting to people. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. I'll call it writing dumb code. How to how to write the stupidest code possible. Um,
To keep room for improvements through debugging.
yeah, exactly. Making debugging easier on yourself.
Thank you so much.
All right.
And have a fantastic start of the week. Because for you, what's the time in Santa Cruz? Here it's almost
It's
9 p.m.
yeah, it's almost noon here,
Ah,
so
and so enjoy your lunchtime and take care, stay home.
yeah, you too.
And thanks so much for this fantastic interview.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.